I knew immediately I had made a mistake. I could tell by the expression on the student's face and by the absence of any sound or movement from the rest of the class. I've been sharing some hypothetical example in my urban studies class to make a point, perhaps about mortgage redlining or urban food shopping. I referred to the student by name in the example. The word she came out of my mouth before my brain registered. I didn't know their gender or pronouns. For the first 2 months of class, I had avoided pronouns, referring to them only by their first name. In that moment, when I knew I had messed up, I felt the blood rushing out of my body. I looked away quickly and continued my lesson, trying to regain my footing, literally and figuratively. Have you had an experience like this? Were you the one misgendering, or were you the one who was misgendered? My incident, when I was the one misgendering, took place in 2012. This is the first student I had who I knew was transgender. This was before I was familiar with the practice of asking someone their pronouns or sharing my own, before email signatures and name tags included pronouns, and before I knew my own child was transgender. I sent an email to the student later that day saying I thought I had used the wrong pronouns, and actually went back and found the email. I do not have a lot of experience with discussions about the fluidity of gender identity, but I feel that this is an area where I need some serious personal growth. I have such respect for the work you are doing in my class, and also find you to be a very cool person. So I definitely want to talk about class today. They responded graciously. No problem at all. I appreciate that you brought it up. And yes, he was the correct pronoun. With time, I can name those feelings I had in class: shame, regret, embarrassment. The blood rushing through my body was the physical embodiment of those feelings. And I can see my response, looking away quickly and trying to get back to the safer ground of teaching, as my defense against those feelings. I'm not a bad person. I didn't do that on purpose. I didn't mean to mess up. I just didn't know. Many of us have become familiar with the phrase white fragility, describing the defensiveness white people feel when we experience stress about racial conversations. Well, cisgender fragility is real too. I may have been new to the conversation about pronouns and gender fluidity in 2012, but I was not new to the experience of challenging gender norms. My parents were so sure I was going to be a boy, my older sister started calling me Stephen before I was born. I don't know all the details, but when I was born, a medical professional at Portsmouth Hospital in New Hampshire looked at my little 6-pound body and declared I was, in fact, a girl, not a boy. This is what the phrase assigned sex at birth means. And even though human biology, internal and external genitalia, chromosomes, hormones, all that defies the simple male and female sex binary, this has been the standard practice in Western medicine. Boy or girl, that's the choice. But having female listed on my birth certificate didn't stop me from expressing my own sense of gender identity. As a child growing up climbing trees, playing sports, collecting matchbox cars, and forgoing skirts and dresses, I could have been the poster child for gender nonconformity. Tomboy was the word the 1970s offered me, and I embraced it. It gave me and other people a way to make sense of my being a girl who liked things more typical of boys. This was long before Judith Butler declared gender was performative, before third wave feminists, queer theorists, and trans activists challenged us to turn upside down our understanding of gender, before a dozen states added X as a non-binary option on birth certificates and driver's licenses. Even though as a child I felt protected by the tomboy label, I still dreaded being called a boy. I remember distinctly the times it happened. At the diner with my mother and sister, ladies before gentlemen, the wait person said, serving my sister first. At overnight camp, psst, there's a boy in the girls' bathroom. The worst was probably when the local newspaper listed me as Andy Miller rather than Amy Hillier, and the caption under a photo of me receiving an award in 8th grade. 8th grade, we're talking after puberty. And everyone in my small town read that newspaper. I wish I knew then what we are increasingly coming to accept today, that the gender binary is a mechanism for social control that oppresses the more complicated and interesting range of gender identities human beings hold. I wish I knew then what felt like shame and embarrassment because I didn't fit within the recognizable confines of girl was internalized cissexism. Cissexism promotes the belief that gender identity should align with sex assigned at birth and denies the existence of people who hold transgender or non-binary identities. Just as people of color can internalize racism, so those who don't fit neatly within categories boy and girl or man and woman can internalize the message they are somehow the problem. My own child challenged gender norms from the time they could choose their own clothes and toys, 18 months, 2 years old. And being a tomboy did not prepare me for the challenge of navigating this gender terrain with a little person, especially as we encountered other people's gender expectations and anxieties. It became clear that I had some serious learning and unlearning to do. Some of that learning came from books by professional gender experts, and even more important, from young trans people, the real experts. Counseling was helpful. When we first met with a new therapist who specialized in gender identity, she quickly assessed that nothing was wrong with our child. She explained, be happy to coach us, the parents, so we could support our child as they figured out their own gender identity. I can see now she was reframing things. The problem wasn't our child's gender identity. The problem was the way people responded to our child's gender identity. This sounds so simple. We, the cisgender parents, were the ones who had work to do, not our gender nonconforming, gender creative, gender euphoric child. Much of my learning also came by getting to know other parents of transgender children. I spent time at the Attic, Philadelphia's LGBT Youth Center. I learned from precious conversations with my child, doing my best to address their questions and doubts. We all have some boy and girl inside us. We can all grow up to love and marry anyone we want. Our bodies don't define who we are. There's no such thing as girl clothes or boy clothes. People should use whatever the bathroom they want. And after a while, I started believing what I was saying. That was the hardest part, reconnecting with the tomboy of my youth, loving the part of me that still doesn't fit into conventional ideas about being a woman. Attending the Trans Health Conference in 2013 was another important part of my education. I hope many of you have had a chance to attend the conference. The Mazzoni Center hosts it at the Philadelphia Convention Center every summer. Well, almost every summer, not this summer, sadly. The first time I attended, my mother traveled from New Hampshire to attend with me. Somehow, she had heard about the conference and was convinced we needed to go. Thanks, Mom. We both attended some sessions with other parents and caregivers, and I was moved and comforted to hear stories about their young children who defied gender norms in the same ways my child did. After attending just one day of the conference, I was ready to go home and help my child change their name and pronouns. I knew the world would not stop as a result because I had met other parents who had done this. My child's need to feel whole and be seen was far more compelling than my fear of answering questions from other adults. But even though I was ready for a name and pronoun change, I wasn't ready to embrace the term transgender. Not yet. Something about reducing my child's journey and gender identity to a simple label didn't feel right, especially when I still felt ambivalence about that label. I remember during my first Trans Health Conference being intimidated by groups of adult trans women at the convention center. I certainly didn't have the courage to speak with them. They were transgender. My child was not transgender. By the following year, I was much more comfortable at the conference. I talked openly about my trans child. I delighted in seeing groups of adult trans women moving about confidently, and I was able to see my own child in them. Loving them meant loving my child. They were no longer the other. They were my own child. The real transformation, though, came later. After I learned to more fully love myself, my gender fluidity, the boy in me, The real transformation came a year or two later when I saw groups of trans women and saw not just my child, but me. Loving them in all their confident beauty meant loving myself, my whole self, and I was finally ready to do that. What would learning and unlearning about gender mean for you? Many of the people in our congregation, cisgender and transgender, have done a lot of this work. Thank you for sharing your own journey with us. If I might offer some advice to those of you who are newer to the conversation, when you set about to reconsider the idea of gender identity, it can't just be an intellectual exercise. It has to be personal, emotional, spiritual. Maybe try reconnecting with your 3 or 4-year-old self. What messages were you receiving about gender? Where did you feel conflict and redirection? Was there a time when you wanted a different name, clothing, makeup or jewelry, a different hairstyle, to play a particular instrument, to play or not play a particular sport? How was your gender creativity stifled? And what questions should we be asking our congregation? How can we make sure First Unitarian is welcome to people across gender identity, in person and during online services, coffee hour that actually has coffee or virtual coffee hour, board meetings, adult education, children's religious education classes? What other work can we do to support trans communities in Philadelphia? I remember hearing First Unitarian had a booth with other UU congregations at the Trans Health Conference. Can we do that again? How can we connect our ongoing commitment to carceral justice to efforts supporting incarcerated people who are trans? How can we work to block the latest White House efforts to deny trans people access to medical and social services? And yes, this is as of 3 days ago. We need to work towards justice on both fronts, in larger public and political ways, and on these individual, personal ways. There is much work to be done. From the time we were little, we were taught to treat the gender binary as an anchor point, a fixed truth, a system for organizing the world. Understanding the gender binary as oppressive and embracing a more fluid notion of gender can be disorienting, but it can also be liberating. Unlearning and learning about gender is no guarantee we'll get pronouns right all of the time. But if we don't do this internal work around gender, even when we get the pronouns right, we won't feel our own connection to this dynamic conversation about gender. And trust me, you don't want to miss out.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abby Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abby just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.